In 2008, pay-per-view events generated more than 5 million buys, beating the demand for boxing and wrestling. That windfall has brought huge paydays for UFC's top fighters. Big stars like Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell, who famously faced off at UFC 57, each earned $250,000 for that bout alone. But an unheralded fighter can make as little as $3,000 for 15 minutes of punishment. Events typically sell out and remain a hot commodity. Seats to the marquee UFC 100 in July 2009 went in a matter of minutes and ranged from $500,000 to $40,000 apiece in the secondary market. Evidence to Lorenzo Fertitta that the UFC is weathering the economic downturn pretty well.
We've been through the mother of all recessions, clearly.
Yeah.
How much are you guys hurt by that?
You know what? We are up year over year in every category: revenues, profits, pay-per-view, live gate, international TV sales, sponsorship, everywhere. The question is, without the recession, where would our business be?
The UFC is privately held and has only started to open up about its finances. The company says its revenues for 2008 were $275 million, up 37% from 2 years earlier. White is fighting for more.
Where does this competitive drive come from with you?
I don't know. I love this sport.
But I get the feeling if you were, selling a bucket of sand, you would be just as competitive.
Maybe.
This is, after all, a man who once said he'd box a UFC champion to settle a contract dispute. But that competitive instinct has also been known to draw controversy. White lashed out against a reporter for her less than flattering coverage of the UFC, which only gave ammunition to those who've criticized his sharp tongue and his aggressive business style.
I don't wear a suit, and I swear. Yeah, I swear, and I say things, I'm brutally honest when I say stuff.
You ever say stuff and then look in the mirror and say, I got to dial it back?
No.
Never?
No, I don't do that. Listen, I'm not that guy. I don't want to be that guy.
Whether that tough guy image is crafted or genuine, it works. And White has taken his act on the road, bringing the fast-growing Fight Club overseas. In early 2009, a card in Dublin, Ireland sold out, and the UFC routinely plays to packed houses in the UK.
Wir sind jetzt in Deutschland!
For the event we traveled to in Cologne, Germany, nearly 13,000 fans showed up, just short of capacity.
Thank you.
What does this reaction tell you about your decision to take this overseas?
Wasn't a bad idea.
Still, the Germany trip wasn't without controversy. A few German politicians and even some in the media assailed the event as glorifying violence. In a compromise with local officials, the UFC reluctantly agreed to ban spectators under the age of 18 from the event, the first time it's ever done so.
Anytime we go into a new market, I expect that 1993 mentality. People don't understand it, they're uneducated about the sport, and they're afraid of it.
But the criticism was bad enough that you told your fighters they think we're animals, they think we're barbarians.
The reality is, we're not that big yet. It's a big world out there, and there's a lot of people that don't even know what ultimate fighting is. And you have to go in there and you have to educate people, and I understand that. The first 8 years of this thing were the hardest, and the next 8 years are going to be a lot easier.
Coming up, out of bounds, over the top, and off the air. The UFC in the bad old days, before Dana White.
You sold it as a blood sport.
Correct. The aggressive marketing is what caused it to have a problem.
With lateral movement. Oh!
A history of violence when Ultimate Fighting Fistful of Dollars continues. We now return to Ultimate Fighting Fistful of Dollars.
The final chapter has been written. Tito Ortiz wins again.
To understand what put the UFC on the road to financial success, you have to go back nearly 80 years and to another hemisphere. Legendary Brazilian jiu-jitsu master Helio Gracie invented his own version of the martial art in the 1930s.
Your dad wanted to challenge Joe Louis, the heavyweight champion of the world,
That's
to a
correct.
fight.
Yeah, to a fight, boxing versus jiu-jitsu.
Rorion Gracie is Helio Gracie's son. His father passed down his methods, still taught by the family today.
He's gonna roll you right now. When he does, your foot goes way behind everything. Leave this leg here. Step, step. Yeah, 1, 2.
My father started modifying the traditional Japanese system to adapt to his, weak body and so on, and gave it more emphasis on leverage and technique and precision and timing instead of speed and strength and so on.
Elio Gracie tested his brand of jiu-jitsu against other martial artists and became a sports hero in Brazil.
I always felt it was something so special, something so unique. It did so good for so many millions of people in Brazil that I thought it would be an important goal or a mission for me to continue my father's work.
Determined to export his family's creation to America, Rorion Gracie moved to Los Angeles in the late 70s and began teaching jiu-jitsu using his garage as a proving ground.
But nobody had any idea of the simplicity and the objectiveness of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. In fact, some of those students would say to me, Rorion, my karate instructor doesn't think Jiu-Jitsu is very good. He wants to fight you. And I said, bring him in. So the students would bring their former martial arts instructors to my garage, and we have those crazy matches, no-holds-barred matches in my garage.
As he feels the pressure on the choke, he briefly struggles, then taps out.
And then the thing kept growing, the challenge match kept happening, and then I thought to myself, I have to bring something like this to a much larger scale.
Hoping to take his mostly underground sport to the big time, Gracie, the martial arts pioneer, turned to another trailblazer who knew how to put on a show.
Who are the transmission people we use?
Bob Meyrowitz had made a name for himself in the burgeoning business of pay-per-view television and saw a hit in the making.
There's jiu-jitsu, there's judo, there's boxing, wrestling. I said, good, let them all fight. We told everybody we're going to find out which is the greatest martial art. And we came up with this 8-sided octagon.
You look at other ideas before you settled on the octagon?
We thought about doing something with a moat and alligators around and sharks and electric fence and plexiglass. And,
seriously?
Yeah. We thought, Hollywood,
Be forewarned, there are no rules, no judges' scores, and no time limits.
Pay-per-view numbers far exceeded expectations. But selling the bloodshed ultimately did more harm than good.
You sold it as a blood sport.
Correct.
In so many words.
Yeah.
And ultimately your aggressive marketing ironically led to its downfall.
The aggressive marketing is what made it so popular. The aggressive marketing is what caused it to have a problem.
Great speed, good lateral movement. Oh, my goodness!
By 1995, the hyping of violence led to a crusade against mixed martial arts. State governments and cable companies were urged to keep the UFC out of the arenas and off the air. The most outspoken critic was Senator John McCain.
I think it's an incredibly brutal spectacle that is on the level of a cockfight, only we're using human beings. This is as close as anything I've seen to the days of the gladiators.
Meyrowitz had no choice but to add rules. Weight classes and time limits were introduced. Headbutts and strikes to the groin were deemed illegal. Ironically, the addition of rules led to the exit of the UFC's first family.
I sold my interest in the company and stepped out exactly because rules will start being implemented against what I had created initially. It's no longer the Ultimate Fighting Champion these days. The guy who wins the UFC is not the world's best fighter. It's just a tough guy who learned to use the rules.
Meyrowitz would exit soon as well. Banned from cable and struggling at the box office, by the year 2000, the joy of creating the UFC had faded.
We were fighting fights all the time. Every time we did a show, I was in court.
It just wasn't fun anymore.
No.
But Meyrowitz wasn't the only one who knew the league was in trouble. For Lorenzo Fertitta, president of the $5 billion Station Casinos empire, his brother Frank and Dana White, the sport was intriguing enough to make them consider becoming more than spectators.
I was like everybody else. I'm like, I can only watch with one eye. It's kind of a train wreck, You watch just out of curiosity, but I certainly didn't appreciate it. We enjoyed the fights, but we sat there and we said, gosh, are we really that different than everybody else, that we actually like this and nobody else cares? Or is something not right here? Could something be done better?
I got a call from Dana White. And Dana White said, I have somebody who wants to buy this. And it just had reached a point where I really didn't want to do this anymore.
Dana came to me and said that he had heard that the owner at the time was looking to sell the business, or that the business was going to trade. He said, you should give Bob a call. I cold called him.
They named a price, we did a deal.
It was just as simple as that.
Just as simple as that.
You washed your hands of the UFC.
I did. And quite frankly, at that point, was happy to.